Well, hi there folks. Not been on here for quite some time. Sorry about that. I've had some pretty big changes going on and some pretty big things happening in my life, which I've been having to deal with. So it has made some, like I say, some big changes in how I do things. Still making knives, still trying to get better, still trying to improve, still working on everything, that I can work on. I'll just say, I'm not sure what this video will come out like. I'm actually using the selfie side of my camera. I normally use the other side, but I can never see what I'm doing and where I'm at and things like that and what's happening. So I thought, well, I'll give this a try. So we'll see where it goes. So the first thing I need to say is this is not a sharpening video. I have got videos on there about sharpening. So if you have a bit of a look back, you can find them if that's what the sort of thing that you're actually interested in. However, this is actually just about the care of your new knife, and then a couple of little misconceptions which are popular out there. Who they kept going by, I'm not too sure. But anyway, apologies for looking down, but I've got a couple of little notes so I don't waffle like I normally do and go on and on and on. But anyway, so the first thing is basically when you have your new knife, and this isn't brand new, it's this one I carry, but you get your nice new knife and it comes through the post, or you picked it up at the show, or you've whatever gone and collected it from whoever. If you've got a knife which has been well made, a good handmade knife, or a really high quality production knife, got a good leather sheath on it, Kydex, obviously if it's a Kydex sheath, plastic, apart from just wiping any dirt off there, that's pretty much it. If you do use Kydex, what I would say though is be really careful not to get grit or anything inside the sheath. Always make sure your knife is really clean before you put it in there. If you don't, the Kydex is relatively soft. Once it gets in there, any little particles of grit, they'll stick into the Kydex and they'll just scratch your blade every time you put your blade in and out. So they're not perfect, they're not completely carefree, they're not completely maintenance free. You have to look after them. Hopefully there'll be a hole, you can always blow some muck out of them, but if that grit gets into the inside, it's not coming out, so just be careful with them. Other than that, pretty simple, just wipe and wash them. You can just stick them in the washing up bowl and wash them out. However, if you've got a leather sheath, drawing it out can be slightly different as well. Often Kydex, you get that little click when it goes in and it's formed onto it, and there'll be a little thumb thing to push out. Often when you get a leather sheath, if it's a well-made leather sheath, it's not just going to come out. Now you need to be careful when you get it. Don't just grab it and start driving it out, because if you bought a decent knife, it will come sharp. It will cut through anything that gets in its way, including even a thick leather sheath, your fingers, or anything else. So don't just grab it and ride it. Okay, one of the first things, if you've got a knife and it's not just going to come out, which it shouldn't, is, and I hope you can hear this, but you just get a little pop if you give it a little squeeze, and it just breaks the seal. And then what happens is, and then just carefully, you'll just give it a little wiggle, and it will come out nice and easy. As you're drawing the knife out, so try and ensure you're pushing the back of the blade onto the back of the sheath, and that helps reduce any risk of the knife coming up and sort of like trying to cut through the sheath and get into your little digits. Yeah. When you're putting it away, it shouldn't be any problem. Just keep your fingers well out of the way when you're putting the knife away. Pop it in till it clicks, and then she's in there again. All leather sheaths will work a little bit loose over time. What I recommend is if it starts to come a bit loose, if you're out and you're in the wet, when you get home, give it a little squeeze. Mind your nails. Give it a little squeeze all the way around before you take the knife out. Then carefully take the knife out. Just a little tiny bit more of a squeeze. Bob it somewhere to dry, and then you can treat it as I'll show you in a minute. That'll re-wet form it, so you don't have to actually go to that. There's some quite good videos on YouTube about how to wet form, so I'm not going to go into that. It makes this video too long. But that's the first thing you do when you've got your new knife. Don't just grab it and start riving it out. Once it's gone in there and it's set in there, and especially if it's sat for a little while, it's not going to come out. So that little squeeze, and then gently out, sliding the back of the knife along the back of the sheath, and out she'll pop. So as I've said, just a quick mention about how you can, if the sheath does get wet and damp, just little squeezes. And I'm sorry if I'm not looking at you when I'm talking. I'm not quite sure. I think the camera's up there, but I'm not too sure, so I'll try and look at you. But yeah, once you've done that, you leave it to dry. Now, generally, for quite a long time when you get a knife, it should have all been treated and everything else. Now, what I use on mine is just Aussie leather conditioner. Now, if you've only got one knife or whatever, and things like that, you don't want to buy a huge tub of something like this. I mean, I go through quite a bit. But there's also mink oil, which has nothing to do with mink, I believe. But it's a similar sort of product. But any Hubbard's shoe grease, snow lock. There's lots of products out there that will feed the leather and help to keep it waterproof. Yeah. So what I recommend is you get any of those products. You can even, if you haven't got anything, boot polish. Just ordinary boot polish, boot wax, anything like that. And it will help to feed the leather. And then basically give it a good rub in. After it's dry, wait till it's dry, give it a good rub in. Also, if you can get your finger in here, yeah, and the top, because that's where the handle will wear onto the sheath, so it will wear. So the finishes that you put in, I put Resolene on the inside to help protect and proof the inside, but over time it will wear because of your handle. So get your fingers in there with a bit of wax and the rest of it, then just put it somewhere warm to dry. Not hot, just warm. Any of the leather, any leather you can treat exactly the same way. There's other products, things like Carnauba cream. Now Carnauba is more of a leather finisher than a nourisher, so that's good for like helping to keep things waterproof and things. You can use it on your wooden handles as well, but it's not designed to like feed the leather. Now if you've got some leather and it's old, or you've inherited an old leather sheath or something like that, or you've been in and out of the wet a lot and you're thinking, oh, the knife is getting a little bit stiff, once you've re-wet formed it, you can apply something like a neat's foot oil. There's lots of people use different things. Some people don't like this. I believe a lot of guys who've used things, even just olive oil, something like that. Carefully you don't put too much on it because this will soften it. Feeds the leather, but it will also soften it. So basically what I do is I rub it in quite gentle, not a lot of it, not, I was trying to say not liberally, but I keep rubbing it in, and you'll see areas where it might be drier than others and it will soak in quicker. So you give it a good rub with your fingers, and just keep rubbing it in, and then when it's not quickly soaking in, wipe it off with a cloth, leave it for a couple of hours, and then finish with something like your leather conditioner, because this has got wax in, or the mink oil, or your boot polish, just ordinary boot polish, anything like that. That'll make your sheath last basically, well, forever sort of thing, if you can call it that. So that's how you look after your leather sheath. And then obviously once it's dry, you bob your knife back in. Now, as long as you oil your knife, there's no reason not to keep your knife in the sheath. Some people say don't do that, but as long as you blaze oil, and the reason for that is there are chemicals in here. Even when the vegetable tanned leathers, it's a chemical. You know, even vegetable tanning is a chemical, so that can cause pitting on your blade. If it's a collector's item or something like a showpiece and it's an heirloom, take it out, wrap it, oil it up and wrap it in tissue and put it away. Just protects it. But that's how to look after your sheath. Right, when it comes to your knife, there's obviously, depending on the type of knife you've got, if you've got a wooden handle, that will need looking after. If you've got micarta, G10, plastic, whatever, again, just warm washing up liquid and water, cleans all the crap off it. Use the same thing on your blade, dry it all off. Now if you've got a wooden handle, what I recommend, now this is, actually I've got it in the wrong bottle, that's the mineral turpentine, so I've changed it. So this is actually a 50-50 mix of boiled linseed oil and turpentine. The reason I use this, it's one of the cheapest going, but any decent wood finish will do, like your Danish oil, teak oil, anything like that. I like this one because it's one of the thinnest. Now, and as long as you do it 50-50 with mineral terps or something like that, it will dry quite can't Some of the others polymerise much quicker. I like the fact that this is thin and I can get a few layers in there and it doesn't tend to build up and gunk up. That's all. I can't say it does a better job, but I prefer it. And what I use to put that on is a bit of fine wire wool. That's all it needs, a bit of fine wire wool, get the terps on and give it a good rub. Spend a few minutes doing it. You don't have to do this every time you've been out, just when it's starting to look tired, or if it's mucky, the wire wool will clean it off, and you just give it a good rub with the wire wool, and you just keep on going for a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes, give it a good rub, keep dabbing it on. You'll see some bits where it might soak in, maybe where your fingers have worn things a bit. Just keep doing that. Even if you've got a stabilised handle, I recommend you do this as well. And then once you've done that for a few minutes, piece of tissue or a cloth, wipe it off, bob it somewhere warm and dry. Leave it for 24 hours, it'll let the oil polymerise, it helps to protect the handle. Because don't forget, even if you've stabilised the timber, it's not a block of plastic. The resin has gone into the fibres and into the timber and it helps all that. But where you've sanded it on, you've still got wood fibre showing, so doing something like this helps to protect the timbers and it keeps it looking really nice. If you've got a new knife, there was an old saying, and that was when you got a new piece of timber, oil it once a day for 7 days. Yeah? Then oil it once a week for a month. And then oil it once a month for a year. And that sounds a lot, but actually if you think about it, after your first week, you've done it 7 days, and it takes you about 3 or 4 minutes, once a day for 7 days. Then 3 or 4 minutes once a week for 4 weeks, and then basically every time you go out. And what they used to say is that'll give you a piece of timber that will outlast you, because it will give the oil a chance to get in. So that's basically all I do with the handle. Again, if I get home and it's manky and it's mucky, warm soapy water, I'll give it a good wash with warm soapy water, give it a good dry, and then I'll treat the handle like that. As far as the blade goes, if it's getting manky and you want it a bit cleaner, a little bit of Scotch-Brite, warm soapy water, Scotch-Brite, give it a bit of a rub. Now what I recommend is you can give it a good rub, but when you're finished, finish off almost like you do when you get a new one made, and just go in the one direction. If you get any little tails and scratches, it just makes it look a bit nicer. Doesn't affect anything, just makes it look a bit nicer. So you can do that to finish it off. Give it a good dry, make sure it's nice and dry, and then I just use something like this, like a bit of baby oil. The reason I use this, you can use olive oils, vegetable oils, fat, anything that will just protect the blade. If it's stainless, obviously if it's stainless, you don't need to do this. If it's carbon steel, I do. Especially if it's going to be stored for a while. Not if I'm using it. If I'm cleaning it up, like I'm out and about and I'm in camp, I'll give it a good clean, good dry, make sure it's dry, stick it back in the sheath, and I just carry on. I don't re-oil it. I only do it when I'm at home or it's going to be left for any length of time, or if I'm like maybe canoeing or something, it's going to get wet. But the reason I use this is it doesn't sour. So if you do have a knife that you don't use for a while, vegetable oils and things can actually sour and go off. This doesn't, but it's also edible, so you can actually use it. Just get your knife straight out and do whatever you're going to do, whether it's cooking or cleaning an animal or anything like that. Layer of that, bob it away, and that's it. That's pretty much Bob's your uncle. And it's a few minutes at a time, keeps everything looking nice and lasting a long time, which you need to because they're bloody expensive for a good knife. Now, the last thing I'll say is some misconceptions. Now, this is my chef's knife. It was actually one of the first ones I made, so that's how I ended up having it, because it wasn't quite right. The handle wasn't quite right. But this, I hope this is showing. Now this lives on a magnetic rack, just stood up on a magnetic rack in the kitchen, and it's been there for just coming up to 2 years now, just on the rack. And all I ever do with this, there's no oil, there's nothing on it, I don't put any oil on it. All I've ever done with this is if I do veggies, I run it, get it under, give it a good run under the tap, both sides, dry it off, hang it back up. If I do meat, I'll get warm soapy water, give it a wash with some warm soapy water, rinse it off, dry it off, put it away. That's it. It's never been oiled or anything else, and it's lived in the kitchen. That bit of discoloration is the acid from the food. It's not rust, it's acid from the food which colours the steel, and that's why it probably won't show up, I'm afraid, not with my phone. I haven't got a camera yet still. Maybe one day, I don't know. But that's purely acid from the food, and it's just like a gun blowing, and it protects it. So don't worry about it. Don't suddenly, every time you get a bit of a mark, get the old, you know. Now if you've done a lot of onions and you start to get quite a black coating, a little bit of the Scotch-Brite, again, just gently rubbed over, will just remove that, and then it stops it from discolouring the food later on. So this thing about knives rusting is, you know, it's bunkum. It's, people either don't look after them, don't know, or whatever. Some things will rust knives very, very quickly. Blood's a bugger for it, but that's the salt and things in it. Now, like I say, that's all I've ever done with that, and it's been in the kitchen for 2 years, just hung on the wall. So, but however, even if you've got a stainless steel knife, you've got to keep it clean. Don't think just because you've got a stainless steel knife, you can take it out, you can clean an animal, you can clean a fish, you can do whatever you want, and you can throw it in your bag. It doesn't work like that. And the reason is, I don't know if any of you have heard, but there used to be an old saying, oh, if you stand on a rusty nail, you've got to be careful because you can get tetanus. That's just an example of one of the things where you get people talking about, oh, you've got to have stainless rather than carbon if you're doing food and all the rest of it. Now, if you stand on a rusty nail that's in the garden, you're not going to get tetanus from the nail or from the rust, ever. Tetanus is a bacteria which lives in soil. And what happens is the nail pushes the soil into your foot. That's what gives you tetanus. Well, actually, bacteria growing and producing and pooing in your body causes the bacteria, causes the infection. But it can be the same thing if your foot actually gets infected from the nail. It's not the nail and it's not the rust. It's the dirt or the muck or the piece of cloth or whatever. It pushes into that hole that causes the infection. Rust is an inert substance. It does not cause infections. So you don't have to worry about it. The reason a lot of people went to stainless is that when you get it down to the common denominator, i.e. the person who is not going to look after their gear, if you do let a knife rust badly, it will pit. If it pits, you're leaving little dents and craters and things in the steel which can hold dirt, bacteria, blood and germs, and then you are more likely to get an infection from using that kind of knife than you would one which is clean. However, like I said earlier about cleaning stainless steel knives, if that knife has residues of blood or matter or dirt on it when you're using it, that can give you an infection or disease just as easily as any carbon steel knife, rusty or not. So if you've got a stainless steel knife and you're using it on animals and then you're going to use it on food and all the rest of it, you have to keep it clean just the same. And it's just like I say, it just becomes easier, because if you allow a knife to rust, then it's harder to clean. So that's why a lot of the food industry went over to stainless steel and moulded on plastic handles, because you've got a moulded on plastic handle. There's nowhere for the food matter to get into. It's not the knife, it wasn't the steel or whatever, or the wood that gave you the infection. Wood has antibacterial properties. It was the gap that can form between a handle, especially on a flexible knife, it can crack the glue. You get a flexible knife, you get dirt or bacteria actually into that gap. That can breed bacteria, that then gets onto your food, that's what gives you the infection. So there you are. So that's a bit of that. So I hope that was reasonably interesting. I'm going to knock off now. I can see I've done about a quarter of an hour, and everybody tells me my videos are too long and I talk too much. Hopefully I might have some more stuff going forward if I can get back into the habit of doing this, and I've got a little bit more energy now, and I'm getting used to everything I'm doing, so I get a bit more time. Sika show coming up in a couple of weeks down in Taupo. Anybody wants to get it? I'm down, I think 327. Come and say hi. I'll talk knives and shite all bloody day long. A couple of weeks after that, we've got the Auckland Blade Show. That's going to be happening actually in Parnell in Auckland. Great day, lots of great makers in there. Everything from people like me trying to produce really high quality working knives to your full-blown, amazing custom kind of work. Hand-forged gear, forged steel, all that stuff there. And there's going to be lots of talks and other stuff like that. So if you can, anybody watching this from New Zealand, anywhere actually, come over and have a visit if you're abroad. It's a nice place to have a holiday. So with that, I'll knock off. Hopefully this doesn't look too stupid, because I'm sure I've never looked at you, and I've looked at myself and not the camera because I'm out of habit. But with that, I will knock off. I will catch you on the flip side, and take care.